Hey, friends, welcome to the podcast. We are happy to be back and we're excited to talk to you a little bit about marriage today. Recently, we've actually had a couple different couples make comments that caught us off guard. And so it helped us do some digging into our marriage, and what we found we wanted to share with you. But one of the couples was saying, I think the question was, when are you going to retire? And the gentleman responded with a later date than we assumed he would say. And we were like, why? Why would you wait until then to retire? And he was like, well, I like my wife, but I don't think we can spend that much time together. And it caught me off guard. It caught Coleman off guard. We were both like, really? We can't wait. We already are looking for ways to get more time together. And we literally spend every day together doing all the things. And so that kind of caught us off guard. And we've had a couple of those interactions recently. And so again, we got to thinking, we're like, okay, we've been married 17 years. We've got 3 kids. We're like in the weeds with everyone else. But what makes our relationship different from these couples who have commented on like not wanting to spend that much time with their spouse? And so, some people think that long marriages are luck or chemistry, it just works for them. But really, the truth is a great marriage is built on skills. And we have learned some skills through these 17 years that have made a giant difference. And if we hadn't learned those skills, I can promise you we'd be in the same boat as that individual we were talking to, because we wouldn't want to spend more time together.
Yeah.
So we wanted to spend some time today talking about the 3 things that we've come up with that we think are, the recipe for what's gotten us where we are today.
Mhm.
I think that's how I would say that. So, but the reality is, like, we're still imperfect and we're still learning, and there's still going to be so many hurdles in our marriage that we have to learn to get through. So we don't have it all figured out, but we do feel like there's a few things we can share with you that hopefully makes your experience of your marriage better, deeper, more full, and what you desire it to be.
Yeah, I think honestly, we just want to challenge the belief that there's such a thing as too much time together. We both enjoy time away from each other. We have a regular schedule of me doing things with the guys or on my own, Abby doing things with her girlfriends and on her own, me doing things one-on-one with the kids, Abby not being there. Same thing for Abby, right? Like we have a schedule of being apart, but this idea of I can't retire or I could never work with my wife or husband, or yeah, just this idea of like, I can't spend that much time with my spouse because they drive me crazy. I think we want to challenge it. We want to say, that's not true for us. That's not our story. And frankly, that's not the story of some friends of ours who are married, who have some of the most beautiful relationships that we have observed from the outside, right? That we've walked through life with them. We've seen the things that they've gone through, hard stuff. It hasn't been easy. And yet they would have a very similar response to us, which is, I love being with my spouse. I'd like to have more time with him. So we just want to challenge that idea and bring to you the 3 truly most important, most revolutionary skills and concepts that we've learned that I think create an environment where we actually want to be together more.
Right, where we're not just putting up with one another. I've heard, specifically in the female world, I can't speak to what you've heard, but I've certainly heard women or wives share like, man, it's just easier when he's not there, right? Whether it's referencing getting the kids out the door or trying to get some housework done or whatever, it's this comment of like, it's just easier when he's not there. And I think there's something underneath that is slightly concerning to me. Now, the truth is, like, if you're cleaning the house, it's easier with the house empty. So I get that. But,
Sure.
my hope is that you've got a relationship where getting the kids out the door is a united experience. And, we were talking about, I think it's a big thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know what's happening on social media, but like there's conversation about the mental load and like the mental load that the woman carries and how that mental load is shifting today with the way that work is shifting for men. The reality that, we had an experience, we just traveled last week, and I truly feel like our mental load is split pretty evenly. And so that one of us is not carrying all of it and just telling the other person what to do. But
Yeah.
it's truly, he thinks through some of it, I think through some of it. A lot of times we decide that ahead of time so that we're not wasting energy overthinking and over crossing lines just because it's more efficient. But, for example, if we're going skiing, it's like I think through all the food, all the snacks, all the water, all the things. He thinks through all the gear and all the stuff that needs to go in the car. And it's like we clarify that ahead of time. And then you really are splitting that mental load. I don't think an ounce about the gear. I
Mhm.
trust that he's got it. So our hope is that we're able to give you some tools that get you to that place where that mental load of marriage and family is maybe more equally divided, and that eases the tension on the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and on the guy's side, I've heard guys who will say, "Well, I don't want my wife to get into hunting because then I would have to take her with me, or I'd feel obligated to go with her instead of with the guys." Whereas I keep trying to get Abby into hunting every year. Every year I'm like, "Will you go hunting with me?" Because I want to spend more time together. And hunting is something that is near and dear to my heart, and so I'd love for Abby to join me in that. I don't see it as a problem or like interfering with the guy time necessarily. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting because we have a different perspective and we want to share that with you.
Yeah. So, first one, which is a giant one, and gosh, we could spend all day on this, but it's throwing out your relationship manual. Now, what does that even mean? You know how every item you open has an instruction manual? Goes through, this is how you put the pieces together, this is how you operate it, this is the on button, this is the off button. Like it has directions for how that item is supposed to function for you. We as humans have manuals for people that we interact with. And sometimes those manuals are acceptable. Like as a boss, I have a manual for my employees, and that's acceptable. I should. But as a wife, I shouldn't have a manual for my husband. And that's different. And a lot of us do. And so, again, this is kind of a hard concept to get around. Coleman, maybe you can give us some examples where somebody might have a manual that they don't realize they have a manual for.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to, I think, put it into words is a relationship manual is a way in which you expect someone to behave in relation to you. I expect Abby to do this for me and not do this. I expect Abby to speak to me in this way and not speak to me in that way. So it's just a manual for how I want her to behave in relationship with me.
And it's not a boundary. A relationship manual is not a boundary because a
Right.
boundary is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
A relationship manual or a manual you have for someone is what you expect them to do. And by having that manual, you're actually missing who they are and you're holding them to a standard that they may not even be aware of.
Yeah, so I mean the most obvious manuals that we have, right, are in America, kind of conservative first world families. I expect you to make dinner. That's a manual that I have for you.
I expect you to take the trash out.
And you expect me to take the trash out. Okay, so those are our manuals for each other, right? And so the trouble with manuals and those kinds of expectations is if Abby makes dinner, well, she just met my expectation. There's no reason for me to thank her. There's no reason for me to have gratitude or appreciation because she's just on par. She just did what I expected her to do. Same thing with taking the trash out. Why would she ever thank me for that? She just expects that to get done.
Somebody's got to do it.
And she expects me to do it, right? So by having a manual, you remove all of the ability, number one, of seeing them for who they are. What if Abby doesn't want to make dinner every night? What if she doesn't want to make dinner any nights? Is that available to her in our relationship? Is that even possible? Or because of my manual she can't ever break out of that expectation. So it allows you to see them for who they are. Number two is when you don't have that expectation and you don't have that manual, then when I take the trash out, then Abby can be grateful and she can thank me for doing that. Hey, thanks so much for taking the trash out, because she knows somebody's got to do it. Sure is nice that she didn't have to. And same for me, right? When Abby makes dinner, I can be like, man, dinner's delicious. Thanks so much for making it tonight. But if I have an expectation, I'm not going to do that. That's just the reality. And so the manual that you have is often invisible to you until you start talking about it. So hopefully this conversation that we're having with you on this episode will bring it to the surface and you'll realize the manual that you have for your spouse. In fact, I would encourage you after you listen to this episode to just take a minute and write down the manual you have for your wife or husband.
Yeah, if you've ever found yourself saying, he should know, right? We've been married how many years? He should know.
Yeah.
It's my birthday, so he needs to do this for me. Anytime you're using should, or what are some other trigger words that can help you figure out what expectation you're holding over someone?
I mean, if you are disappointed or resentful when your spouse doesn't do something, you have a manual,
Right.
right? So if I am disappointed that you didn't make dinner tonight or last night, I have a manual. If I am disappointed that you didn't clean up the poop from our elderly dog in the house, I have a manual and I
Yeah.
expect you to clean up the poop, right? Like
Yeah.
if you are disappointed or resentful towards your spouse for something they didn't do or didn't say, you have a manual for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's, I think, where you have to be careful, because I know when I first learned about the relationship manual, I was very much like, well, somebody's got to do this stuff. And if I don't expect him to do it, then it's me and I can't do anything else. Right.
Mhm.
So it was like, as soon as I learned about this for me, anyways, I initially was like resentful because I felt like it was
Yeah.
all going to land on my shoulders
Yeah.
then. So how does it not land on my shoulders if I remove all expectation from you?
Yeah. That's a common objection that people will say. Oh, if I don't have a manual for them, then they'll just do nothing and I'll do everything. I'll do all the work. But again, like you're giving away all of your power to this person, right? Because you also don't have to do the work. So it sounds funny, right? It's a funny example, but the elderly dog pooping in the house, our mind is like somebody's got to pick it up. And if he doesn't do it, I got to do it. Nobody has to pick it up,
Technically.
right?
Yeah.
Nobody has to pick up the poop.
Don't tell
So
our children that.
the fact that we think somebody has to do it is the problem,
Right.
right? And so what Abby and I like to do, instead of just to kind of give you, let your brain kind of, okay, here's what manuals are all about. Okay, well, what do you do instead? We talk to each other. We ask each other for things. So last night's a great example. I asked, hey, Abby, would you like me to make dinner tonight? Her response was, no, I have a plan. So notice how the expectation wasn't, are you going to make dinner? It was, somebody needs to make dinner. Why not me? Hey, Abby, can I make dinner for you tonight? No, I have a plan. That's a perfect example of, we're not going to have expectations, but we are going to communicate about what's going to happen. Now, for some people, it's better to plan that stuff ahead of time, right? So instead of having a manual, let's communicate it about ahead of time. I make dinner on Wednesdays, you make dinner on Tuesdays. We're both good with that? Great. That's not a manual. That's something that you've both agreed to and committed to, right?
It's like a agreed upon contract.
Yeah.
You're both agreeing to whatever it is.
So I think there's just a difference, and I understand that it's nuanced, but I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference when you agree to something together versus when you expect someone to do something, when you have that manual for them. A lot of us have ways in which we like to keep our space or our home tidy, and we put that manual on our spouse.
Yeah.
I expect that you will do this in the bathroom, and I expect that you will do this in our bedroom, and I expect that you will do all these things. And they're an adult. They may not want to be as tidy or as organized or as clean as you are. And that can be a real rub for some people. There are things that Abby and I do very differently that we've come to accept, and it has almost become like a kind of like a Tinder thing where we're like, oh, there we go again.
It's a term of endearment, but
It's
it's not.
endearing instead
Yeah.
of something that causes a fight. I think at the end of the day, if you want your relationship to be the best it can possibly be, and you want to actually enjoy spending time together, and you want to get to know them for who they are, not who you think they should be or who you want them to be, you got to throw out your manual and instead start seeing who they actually are. When you drop all those expectations and you just say, I am just going to see you for who you are. I'm just going to, it's like getting to know you again over and over and over again. We've been married 17 years. We're still getting to know each other. But that's because the manual thing we're talking about, it's not something we do perfectly. It's something we have to practice every day.
Yeah. And I would say that if this relationship manual feels like it's a little confusing to you, there is some depth to it. And so in our relationship, we actually started out with just the simplicity of not holding expectations over one another. And we actually went through, at one point, we did the practice of figuring out where we were holding obvious expectations. The relationship manual takes you one step deeper in the subtle expectations that you didn't even realize you were holding over them. But if you want to kind of level back and be like, okay, where do I start? The starting point for this is just simply like, what are the really obvious expectations I have for my spouse that are very clear, that I can reset, that I can take the expectation out of it? Maybe you then ask them, like, hey, can you do this for me? I
Exactly.
could use help here.
Yes.
Instead of, we're trying to leave the house and you haven't put the kids' shoes on yet.
Right.
Hey, the kids could use their shoes on. Can you help them put their shoes on? Whatever that looks like, dialing it back to the point of like, just find the most obvious expectations. And then as you level up, you'll start to notice the more subtle expectations. Because in a relationship for us that's 17 years old, there are some extremely subtle expectations that took a long time to find.
And I think what's interesting is I give the example of poop in the house, which is kind of an extreme one, but there is the example of poop in the backyard. What's interesting about that is you have dogs, they poop in the backyard. There's lots of poop in the backyard. So one person probably cares more about picking that up than the other. And so that person that cares more about picking it up might feel obligated to do it because they care. But you can always ask, hey, I got a busy week. Would you be willing to pick up the poop this week? Because that would just be a huge help to me. I know it's not as important to you.
Right.
Right. And so that gets us into the other piece of throwing out your relationship manual is learning to honor and understand the differences between you. So when we first got married, we saw our differences as threatening, right? We saw the differences between us as a problem, a pain point, something that had to be fixed. You got to agree with me or I got to agree with you. That's how it's got to be. Versus we're different. You have a different perspective. I have a different strength. I have a different weakness. So it's just different.
Yeah.
It's not right or wrong. It's different.
Yeah. A good example for us on this one is planning. I tend to be in the moment. I'm going to solve the problem that's right in front of me first. And I'm going to keep solving the problems that are right in front of me because they keep showing up right in front of me. And Coleman is very future minded. So he'll come to me and he'll be like, hey, summer of 2028, I was thinking, and I was always like, excuse me, what? Like, I'm just trying to get through January of 2026. And there was a point there where there was quite a bit of tension where like he'd throw something at me and I'm like, I can't even think about it. But now that we know each other and we begin to honor those differences, I will acknowledge that like, okay, I see your need to plan adventures ahead of time. And I realize that sometimes those adventures require that. I can't do that right now, but I promise that I'll carve out some headspace for that at this time on this day. And so this is how we honor our differences, right? I will never, like, if you just keep asking me about future plans, I will probably never commit to them if I don't plan ahead and plan time for that, because I'm just going to keep solving the problems in front of me. So that was like a major difference where I get irritated when he'd ask me those things that were so far out, because I was like, how do you even have brain space for that?
And I would get irritated because I knew that she valued and enjoyed
the adventure,
those experiences, but she wouldn't help me get them planned. So it was like this, our differences were really clashing and we just needed to understand each other better so that then we could make a plan that worked for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think another good example of understanding and honoring differences is once you throw the relationship manual out, that's actually what gives you the opportunity to get to know them so that you can understand them, and then when you understand them and you understand that they have these strengths and these weaknesses, what you'll probably find, because opposites often do attract, and Abby and I have found this time and time again in our relationship, is my weaknesses are often her strengths. And her strengths, let me say it the other way, and my strengths are often her weaknesses. So instead of fighting and arguing and talking about how you need to be more like me or we need to think this way or do things that way, we actually just design a life that capitalizes on my strengths and her strengths.
Right.
Because we shore up each other's weaknesses. Okay, so here's an example. There's going to be a spouse in the relationship that cares about the poop getting picked up in the yard. That's probably the spouse who's going to pick up the poop. And the thing is, the other spouse probably cares about something else in the household way more than that other person. So let's just use the example. This spouse cares about not having poop in the yard. So they're going to pick it up every week. Amazing. This spouse cares a lot about really good food. And so they're going to make most of the meals because they're really passionate about having good food, strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, do you see how they support each other instead of working against each other or fighting each other? And here's the thing, when you throw out the relationship manual and you start to look through this lens of what strengths does my spouse have that are actually things I'm not good at or my weaknesses, you will be amazed at how many of those you can find. I will come to Abby very regularly as it relates to the coaching business and say, I would love to get your perspective on this because this is not one of my strengths, but it is yours. So you can really leverage each other's strengths when you throw out the relationship manual and you focus on honoring each other's differences. So, couple of practical things you can do on this one.
When you begin to throw out your relationship manual for your spouse, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but then you start to take responsibility for what does matter to you. It also shifts the energy behind doing the task, right? So in the conversation of poop and food, Coleman was actually referencing him and I. The poop bothers him. It doesn't bother me as much. And the food, like good quality food, is really important to me. So like last night when he was like, do you want me to make dinner? I was like, no, I don't, because what we eat tonight matters to me. And because of that, I have no issues with making dinner, right? There's no resentment. There's no there might be a little resentment over my children who like to throw my food away, but that's a different story. But truly, I don't feel like it's it's not a labor of love. I don't feel like it's a burden,
right?
Because I know I'm choosing to do that chore because it matters to me. And so there's also that, when you throw out the expectations for your spouse, then you get to own what matters to you. And it just shifts, it really does shift the chore or those mundane tasks that really can rub and cause friction to oh no, this matters to me. I want it to be this way.
And for those of you watching this or listening to this who think, well, everything matters to me. What do I do if everything matters to me? The answer to that question is you think everything matters to you, but it doesn't.
It can't, ultimately.
It can't.
Yeah.
So if you think everything matters to you, that's a coping mechanism.
Well, you're probably an idealist, and sometimes you got to let the idealism fly. It can't be ideal.
Yeah. So the reality is if you sat down and did an exercise of figuring out what actually matters to you and just limiting yourself to the top 5, top 10 things, you would start to get a little bit more understanding even about yourself, which is helpful.
It is.
Okay, so a couple of practical things on the relationship manual and honoring and understanding differences. It can be super helpful to make a list of all the things that are in your manual for your spouse. Time box it, take 10 or 15 minutes, just write out as many as you can think of. That awareness alone will have you showing up differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, so I've done this for somebody in my life. It actually wasn't you, it was somebody else.
I know.
And I just want to put a warning on it. You write out your relationship manual for someone and you're going to feel like a really lousy person.
You might.
Because when you look at the manual, you're like, oh yeah, who am I to have all these expectations over somebody?
Which is a good thing to
know that it might not feel good.
But it will be
really good.
It will be good. It might not feel good, but it will be good.
Just want to, this is the humanity of it.
Yeah.
We've been in the pool with you. The only reason we're telling you these things is because we've done these things. I remember when I did it and I was like, man, I am a terrible person. And I had to go through that process of releasing those expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. The second practical thing you can do, again, we're just building awareness. That's always the first step. And anything you want to change, you have to build awareness. The second practical thing you can do is make 2 lists. Again, set a timer, 10, 15 minutes. Make a list of strengths you believe your spouse has and strengths that you think you have. And notice the differences. Notice how they probably, in a lot of cases, complement each other.
Yeah. And then maybe if you can have that conversation with your spouse, where you can really put each spouse in their optimal place.
And there will always be tasks
that nobody's good at.
That nobody wants to do or nobody's good at.
Yeah.
And my suggestion with that is you're a team.
Yeah. Divvy them up.
Divvy them up.
Do them together. Make
it fun, however you want to tackle it. But think about a team, right? A team always has to do tasks they don't want to do.
Yep.
All right. Number 2. This one's one of my favorites. Unconditional love and support is your only obligation in a marriage relationship. How do you react when I say that, Ab?
I guess I feel like there's a caveat here that unconditional love is not always what you think love looks like
Absolutely.
true love. And unconditional love comes from a combination of what you know your spouse loves, enjoys, needs, and what you have to offer. Because unconditional love can't come from obligation, which is why it's a little bit like unconditional love can't come from obligation.
Right. That can't be the source. That can't be the root of it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so there are times when, and like externally, unconditional love doesn't always look the same.
Right.
So from one day to the next, unconditionally loving Coleman might mean that I make his lunch for him today because I want to serve him and I want to take care of him and I want to honor him. The next day, unconditional love might mean I step outside and I don't make lunch for anybody because I'm going to be a better person when I come back in. Right. So like, I feel like when you first hear unconditional love and support is the only obligation, again, I feel this like, oh, like I'm only human. I can't do it all. I can't do it right. I can't, all the things my one is showing. But then when you pause and you really come down to like, well, what is love? And there's a few books. One is called Love is a Choice. There was another one. I can't remember what the other book is, but I know for me, when I read the book Love is a Choice, it was very insightful because for those of us that do tend to lean into obligation, we would do a lot of things for love that aren't actually loving because they came with this tank of resentment on them. And sometimes the loving act is the one that doesn't appear loving from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start with defining what we mean by unconditional love because people can assign all sorts of meaning when we say unconditional love. So, what we mean by that is your job is to be on your husband or wife's team. You're on the same team. And there are going to be things that they say or do. There are going to be mistakes that they make in your relationship that cost both of you. There are going to be weeks that they're a jerk. There are going to be hard days. There are going to be difficult seasons. But what all we really mean when we say unconditional love is actually choosing to feel love towards them, even when you don't like them, and choosing to offer them what love offers, which is we're on the same team. I see you. I hear you. You're a jerk right now, and I don't like you, but I'm going to choose to keep loving you.
Yeah.
And loving does not necessarily mean action. Loving does not necessarily mean, like Abby was giving the examples of, we're not necessarily talking about. So that means you have to do their laundry and pick up the kids from school and run all these errands. And that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah. Loving isn't enabling. It's not saving. Right. I think that's why I started where I started, because when I heard it, I was like, I feel like that's where my mind can go, enabling and loving. Like we had a situation, it was a few years ago. If you know me, I do not enjoy talking on the phone. And I will, if I have to call somebody, I will put it off for days. And like if I have to call to make an appointment, I just won't make that appointment. And it was a number of years ago now, but Coleman was like, and this is what it means, I think, to be on each other's team. He was like, hey, Abby, you need to call this person. And he's like, I know you don't want to do it. And I know I can do it for you. But I think it's really important that you do this as a part of your like growing up, basically. And to me, that's an act of love, right? He didn't enable me. He didn't make the call for me, even though it's so easy for him. It doesn't bother him at all to call somebody. He encouraged me to step into maturity and to face, to some extent, some kind of resistance I have in my life. And so that's where I just want to be clear on love is not enablement.
It's not doing things for them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. It can be.
It can be.
It doesn't have to be.
But yeah.
Yeah. So there's a reason why we said unconditional love and support, because I think support actually is a really helpful clarifier here. Because you're in a relationship with another adult. Your job is actually not to take care of them. They're not a child. Your job is not to coddle them or enable them or do everything for them or rescue them or, do all these things that you might do for your children. Your job is to support them.
Right. We actually want to do that podcast, the difference between supporting and rescuing, because even for your kids, that's such a fine line,
Hmm.
and there's lots of questions around it. But like, what does it look like to love and support versus rescue and enable?
Yeah, I mean, so here's some definitions, right? Supporting your spouse doesn't mean agreeing with everything that they say or do. It means they know you are fundamentally for them. You are fundamentally for their good. You are fundamentally in support of them and the things that they care about, the things that they want to create in their life. You can kind of contrast that with scorekeeping or emotional withdrawal, right? Where we keep score. Well, you didn't do this for me, so I'm not doing it for you. Or where we withdraw emotionally as a way to like get back at them or to kind of stab them.
Right. Or I've taken care of the kids 6 times to your 1 time. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can count on me to be emotionally responsive. That's a super important part of support in a relationship. So, not emotional responsibility, but emotionally responsive. There's a difference, and we'll get to that shortly here because our next one's going to talk about emotional responsibility. But emotional responsiveness is when you are going through something that is creating emotion for you. Maybe a friend passed away, maybe a hard season at work, maybe a difficult situation with a friend. I am emotionally responsive to you, which means that I make myself available, like you said, not indefinitely, but for whatever time or capacity that I have to be with you in a non judgmental way and to hear what you have to say and to see you and really like see your pain, witness the fact that this is very painful for you.
Right.
So then I think this leads us into this idea of love being a choice. And the first time I heard my coach, Brooke Castillo, share this idea, I blew my mind. And I didn't believe it was true until I actually took it for a ride. I started practicing and experimenting with it, and I realized it actually works. She's right. Love is actually a choice. And so I think what some of us interpret, I know what I interpreted when Brooke said it. When you hear love is a choice, you're like, oh, I'm going to choose to love them and be committed to them and take care of them, even though I don't actually feel love towards them. So I'm going to act in a way that actually doesn't align with how I feel towards them. That's how I interpreted it, which sounded really incongruent. And what my coach Brooke, was actually talking about is this idea of your relationship with your husband or wife is just the thoughts you have about them, especially the ones that you have on repeat. And those thoughts can create resentment. They can create joy. They can create love. They can create all kinds of emotions and feelings in your body. And it's actually possible. And I can tell you this because I've done it for Abby and a lot of my coaching clients have done it. But it's actually possible to create a feeling of love towards someone with your thoughts, even when the automatic thoughts are maybe resentment or disappointment or why didn't they do that?
Yeah, I mean, if you cycle back to our expectations conversation, if all you're thinking about is those expectations that they're not hitting, and that
Hmm.
is all you're thinking about, like think about how annoyed and frustrated you are with this person. But if you drop those expectations, you're immediately changing the thoughts that are already cycling through your mind. And if your relationship is truly just what you think about that person, which that's a whole concept that is very deep and worth exploring at some point, then you're already changing how you're thinking about them. So if love is a choice and you choose to think differently about this person, it can change everything.
Yeah. So unconditional love and support is our those are our responsibility in relationship to each other. And feeling love towards your husband or wife, that is a choice. And in order to create a relationship that you want to be in and that you aren't afraid of spending too much time together, choosing to think thoughts that create a feeling of love for you is the way to go. That will completely shift things for you. So here's something practical that you can tackle on this week. Make a list of where you are enabling or rescuing versus supporting your spouse. So where you're doing things for them, you're essentially treating them like a child instead of an adult. And you actually need to think through, okay, what would it look like to support them instead? And then think about areas where perhaps you do have kind of that scorekeeping happening versus the unconditional love versus the no, I'm going to choose to feel love towards you regardless of what the score is.
Right.
So, a couple of practical applications there.
Well, and the reality is, if you keep thinking about the grievances, your love is going to fade.
Mm.
So if you can start to look for the places where you are appreciative and where you are generous with your thoughts and you find the good and you focus on those, it will start to shift those cycles. So that's another practical tip. It's like, okay, what thoughts are taking over and what thoughts do I want to put on repeat? What thoughts do I want to choose to put in versus the ones that your subconscious wants to put in that are often negative because that's
Yeah.
simply how we survive.
Yep.
Whether they're true or not, the likelihood is there's a lot of good happening along with a lot of hard. And so you get to decide, do you want to focus on all the hard or do you want to look for the good? And the funny thing about looking for the good is it tends to allow the good to grow.
And in almost every situation of coaching clients that I've worked with, if they bring a bunch of grievances about their spouse to the coaching session, just a few curious questions about what else is going on or what else they're doing, or are they just jerks all the time, or are they ever doing anything that is good and positive and generous? And like, the reality is it's always 50-50. It's just that we're so focused on the negative 50 that we don't see the good 50.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they're both available to you at all times. So it's just a choice. You get to make that choice. And that sounds simple because it is, but it's not easy. It is actually something that you have to be intentional about.
Right. Yeah. And finally, of the 3 tools, the third one is emotional responsibility, your own emotional responsibility, and really coming into yourself as an adult. And I know that that's a funny thing to talk about at 39 years old when we've been adults now for 21 years, right? But for a lot of us, we're still learning how to be an adult. As a homeschool family, it's like, oh, let them enjoy their childhood, keep them in their childhood. But then also, at what point do we get to train them to be adults? Because we all get to adulthood, and I feel like we spend our entire adulthood trying to figure out how to be adults. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because in so many ways, we are not taught the most important
Skills.
to become an adult.
Right.
For some reason, in childhood, as a society, we don't prioritize these things.
Yeah. Anyway, so your emotional responsibility. They're not responsible for your emotions. So let's say Coleman does something and I respond with frustration. And my first thought is, he makes me so mad. That's actually not accurate. He isn't making me mad. I am choosing to be mad about what just happened. Then I have the power back in my own pocket to decide if I want to be mad about this or if I want to be frustrated with this. So, this idea that nobody can make you feel a certain way requires you to take your own emotions and be responsible for them, which is very hard to do in a world where we're teaching our kids, like, hey, you made Sally sad. They didn't make Sally sad. Sally decided to be sad because something happened to her, right? So it's a delicate balance because it can feel insensitive when you say it, because as a culture, we've been trained that we make other people feel a certain way. But when you step out of this and you realize that you truly are responsible for your emotions, it really does change things in your marriage.
And the clarifier there, just for people who might be, their mind is exploding right now with what you just shared. The clarifier is you're always responsible for your actions and how you showed up. You're not responsible for how someone says they feel about your actions and how you showed up, but you are responsible for those actions and how you showed up.
Right.
So if you showed up in a way that doesn't align with your values, or you showed up a way that on reflection, you're like, oh yeah, that was mean. Like, I was mean. I was trying to be mean. that was my goal.
There's no doubt about it.
You're responsible for that.
Right.
You're not responsible for the other person's emotions about how you showed up. And that's, again, very nuanced, but very important difference.
It is. It is. Yeah. Let me think about another way to apply this within our relationship, right? Because I think even those long-standing relationships, it can get even more muddled because you're so entwined in what you're doing and living life.
I have a perfect example.
Perfect.
Abby is an introvert. For those of you who are familiar with love languages, her love language is not physical touch. My love language is physical touch. She's an introvert. Having 3 kids, there's a lot of touching that happens with the kids because you're parents and you want to hug your kids and kiss your kids and snuggle your kids and all the things. Beautiful. I would, because I really actually have gotten a lot better about this, but I would often blame Abby for how I felt. I feel lonely, or I feel disconnected, or I feel like you don't care about me, or I feel insecure. And I would put all of that emotional responsibility on Abby because she's my spouse. She's my wife. Isn't it her responsibility to make me not feel lonely and to feel connected and to, there's a lot of popular literature that would say that's true. But the reality is, as long as I put that responsibility on her, then I wasn't responsible for my own emotions. And frankly, it's not her responsibility, and she could never solve that problem for me because I'm an adult. It's my job to be responsible for my emotions. So what I would often do is I would often sulk and pout when Abby had a week where it was pretty intense with social events, with our kids, with friends, whatever, because she wouldn't really have much capacity to hang out or spend time with me. And I would pout and I would sulk. That's how I handled that because my emotions were her responsibility. Now, I would say something that I'm pretty good about. Like we said, we're not perfect. We're still practicing this. I'm pretty good about saying, hey, it's been a while since we've had a chance to connect. It's been a while since we've gotten away for a date or whatever. Can we make that happen? Notice how I'm taking responsibility for my emotions and what I want in the relationship. Abby can say no, and that's totally her prerogative. But often, 99.9% of the time, she also wants to connect and wants to spend that time together and is feeling the disconnect. So she says yes, and we make a plan and we get together. But notice how I have to take responsibility for that. It's not Abby's fault that I'm feeling insecure. That's my fault. I'm thinking thoughts that create insecurity for me. So this idea of emotional responsibility, your spouse doesn't cause your emotions, is super important. You always cause your emotions.
It really is. And that is another one of those really deep concepts that takes some time. And we've given you a couple, the relationship manual, being responsible for your emotions, unconditional love. Like actually all three of these are relatively deep concepts. So I would suggest picking one and spending a month on it. Maybe coming back to this podcast and pick another one. And spend a month on it, whether you're a journaler or you're a reader or you've got some quiet time where you come back on a regular basis to a topic to learn and grow and expand. Pick one and just begin to bring awareness to it.
Yep.
Begin to pay attention to where you are putting your emotional responsibility on somebody else, your kids, your spouse, and see where you can take that back.
Mhm.
Where can you then step into that?
Yeah.
But all three of these aren't you make changes tomorrow and it's better. All three of them take some time and practice to begin to refine and to feel and see the benefits from them.
Yeah, these are things that both of us have been committed to working on for years. And I can tell you we're sharing them with you today because of all the things we've done in our marriage, of all the books we've read, podcasts we've listened to, all the resources on relationships that we've consumed. Nothing has been more powerful than these three. Nothing has shaped our marriage in a really positive way as much as these three things.
Absolutely.
Take us through the three one more time, Ab, so that we can just summarize it.
Yeah. So you're looking at emotional responsibility. You are responsible for your emotions. To unconditional love and support. I'm working backwards, by the way. If you're chronological like me, needed to clarify. Unconditional love and support. And that's not rescuing and enabling. Those are different. And then finally, your relationship manual and putting it down, letting it go, letting the person be exactly who they are, and you taking care of your needs and what you need to communicate to meet those needs versus holding those expectations, often unspoken, over somebody.
Exactly.
So, like I said, those are three really big skills and tools. Choose one and spend a month on it. Don't hurry through it. Give yourself the chance to come back to it. Often, it's funny when you talk about meditation, when I think about fitness and health, it's really not necessarily getting it perfect or focusing on it all the time, but it really is how often you come back. And the quicker you come back and the more frequent you come back to an idea or a thought, that's when those neural pathways start to get deeper ingrained. And so pick one of those to bring awareness to pay attention to, and to get familiar with. And then come back, bookmark this podcast, come back and try another one and build on it so that you can build and progress through these skills.
And I would just say, just to speak to both situations, you may be in a relationship where you can have this conversation with your spouse. You can have them listen to this podcast and you can choose together, hey, we're going to work on this one together.
That can be helpful because then your
That's,
spouse can be like, hey, you're putting that on me.
yep.
And that can be really helpful. Like, oh, I am.
You may also be in a relationship where it's tough, it's difficult. You're in a
Yeah.
challenging season and you don't feel like you can do this with your spouse.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It'll
You
still
can
change
still
everything.
make incredible progress in your relationship if you're the only one doing it, because they will be impacted by the changes you make, and it will be in a positive way. Now, if you're enabling and rescuing someone, they might not think it's positive initially, but in the long run, they will be impacted in a positive way.
They will. All right, friends. We'll see you soon. Yeah, I know.